There's so many myths around marijuana these days and amongst youth. And that's personally my biggest concern. Synthetic marijuana also will cause a psychiatric situation, will cause psychosis. And as we have recorded in the last years that we've been studying this, first psychotic episode, it's almost 80% curable if treated properly. If people continue to smoke synthetic marijuana or other synthetic drugs and have a second psychotic episode, then the chance for treatment, for cure, drops to 40%. And after a third psychotic episode, the chance of coming out of this permanently drops to 20%. So here we are dealing with youth, young people who have been smoking, long-term synthetic drugs and end up either in psychiatric units or antipsychotic medication long-term because of this extra, I would say, impact or secondary diagnosis that synthetic drugs will cause. So we've been dealing this last decade with a more complicated situation when it comes to the new synthetic drugs. Europe has been recording almost every year 70 new of these synthetic drugs. And the way it's been going on is that people, within the drug trade, they'll slightly change the formula. The new drug remains, legal for a few months until it's spotted and becomes illegal. But it affects a lot of young people. It's much cheaper. And it's, I would say, much more difficult to deal in therapy because of its complications with psychiatric situations. This has been the new era in the field of substance abuse. So 10 years ago, in our center, for example, because it's a therapeutic community and it's a long-term inpatient facility, we used to cater for heroin IV users. I know the United States has been struggling with heroin abuse in the last decade, but Europe has been mostly dealing with synthetic drugs.
You mentioned psychosis. What is psychosis? How can someone understand they've got a psychotic episode? And what does it mean when I have long-term psychosis and psychosis as a...
Yes, that's a very good point. We need to explain it. Psychosis, it's a situation where the person dissociates with reality. And within this dissociation, the person can have symptoms like hearing voices, having illusions, getting paranoid on almost permanent basis. It's really extremely difficult for the patient to deal with all these symptoms. And in return, people become very violent in their effort to protect themselves in their own paranoid ideation. So we need to treat these people with antipsychotic medication to help them reground themselves and regroup themselves and alleviate these severe symptoms that are not that give them the sense of losing their mind almost. It resembles a lot to the diagnosis of schizophrenia. And when we say dealing with it, if we deal, early episodes of medication, people can, once they stop using the drugs, when these episodes are drug-induced, then we can have good outcomes and good results. However, if they continue to use synthetic drug substances, what we mean by long-term is that people need to remain on antipsychotic medication, sometimes for the rest of their lives, just to make sure to alleviate the symptoms of psychosis, which, as I said before, is hearing voices, having illusions, being paranoid, and generally dissociating from reality.
There's a lot of things I want to ask. I want to give an example of paranoia, and maybe you can confirm it. I was with one of my friends who did edibles, and this was the first time he was exposed to any sort of drugs, and he had I don't know if it was a psychotic episode, but he was hearing stuff that wasn't there. He would get paranoid. He had heart rate goes up. His constriction in chest. He had a panic attack, and then the paranoia was we were in the tube, and he thought someone wanted to kill him, and constantly, and yeah, it kept on going through his mind. It's very difficult to
Exactly. What we're describing, Andreas, is actually quite a typical psychotic episode where people feel afraid that somebody's trying to kill them, somebody's watching them. And it's a horrible feeling for people to feel being chased off for their life. And that's when sometimes they actually can get very violent themselves in what they think it's in their defense. But what in reality it is a complete illusion entire time. You know that even though marijuana has been wrongly portrayed as an innocent drug, synthetic marijuana, we actually have one recorded death in the United States, in Colorado, a couple of years ago, where a college student jumped off his dormitory floor because he thought he was being chased and ended up losing his life after using edibles.
What would you say to a young person who would come up and say, "Well, it's okay. I use marijuana once every week. I'm fine. I've been doing it for years." What would you answer to that?
Almost always, when I have discussions with young people that regularly use marijuana, if you get to the bottom of it, of the lifestyle of a young person using it, people have the illusion that it helps them concentrate. And it does give that illusion to some people that lack concentration. Or they think they're more creative. That's another myth. The reality of it is that if we have one major symptom that marijuana will cause is being, trying to find the word in English, being sitting on the couch, having goals and dreams for your life, but never putting them in action. Procrastination and always postponing for the next day. That's a status that every single regular marijuana use will admit to that.
Yeah.
So they have plans, they want to go on with their lives, but their life is stuck sitting on a couch, smoking and, planning for the next day. Another major symptom that marijuana will cause that people don't most of the time realize unless they go into an analysis with a therapist is that it actually locks the emotional situation of the person. So if we have a young person who might be struggling with feelings of depression, if they use marijuana, on the surface, it might alleviate a bit of that, but in actual reality, it locks the emotional situation where it is and does not allow the person to move on. So in my book, these are major consequences because people end up getting stuck. They smoke marijuana originally for fun, I guess, when it comes to young people, but regular users will almost always admit to getting stuck in situations that actually wanted to move away from.
It's interesting. I didn't know about this. What would you answer to the other case of a young person going to university and then being offered to smoke weed for the first time? Do you consider that okay, just for wanting to see what it is, or should we avoid that as well?
To be honest, obviously, I might not be the best person to ask, even though I'm always asked. I'm on the other end of this story. I cannot ever agree to anybody trying to use any kind of drug, anything that will affect the conscious of the brain. We need to protect ourselves. There is so much going on around us that, especially young people going into college, there is so much going on. Young people need to learn to protect their minds, their developing brains, and their emotional worlds. If people are not emotionally stable and well, they cannot really deal with anything in my book. So our emotional world needs to be very well protected, and we can't play with fire. So personally, I'm completely against trying anything. You can experiment on a hiking trip, on sports, on everything and anything on this planet. It doesn't have to be with illicit drugs, or even in countries where it is illegal. And that's a whole different, discussion of why some countries choose to decriminalize marijuana. And we can actually, say a couple of things about that. But because it's a tough world out there, and because you're going through very difficult times, we need to protect ourselves, because in the case we're at a difficult period in our lives, trying something and experimenting on something feels good, then we do run the risk to repeat it. And we need to find healthy ways to entertain ourselves, healthy ways to have fun, and healthy ways to be good, to be well. So no, I am extremely against. I'm very against about alcohol using as well in the developing brain, to be honest. And we also underestimate in our country, especially in our part of the world. There was a brilliant, shocking, even for us as a professional, statistic that came out from the UK 5 years ago. A research that pointed out that regular alcohol use, not necessarily abuse, regular use between the ages of 15 to 18 will multiply your chances of becoming an adult alcoholic by 6 times. Now, that's a very scary statistic.
If you enjoyed that, you can click the link in the description to watch the full podcast or listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our website. You can also ask questions in the comments below, which will be directed to healthcare professionals in our future weekly episodes. Thank you so much for watching.